will need 2 balls of yarn, a 12 peg loom or a long loom, a little red hook, and a pair of scissors. To begin, I'm just making a slip knot using my yarn and placing this on the central knob. I'm going ahead and e-wrapping all the pegs for only one time, and then what I'm going to go ahead and do is just knit off the first 2 pegs. I'm going to follow this by purling the next 2 pegs and then knitting off the next 2. So you're just going to continue this pattern of knitting 2, purl 2, knit 2, purl 2, knit 2, purl 2, all the way around the loom. I have a whole video on how to make the purl stitch, which I will link below. You can kind of see a summed up version of what to do here, but like I said, there's a video that goes more in depth that I've already created, and it will be linked below. So I'm just going to go ahead and do this for about 8 more rows, continuing the pattern. So now that I've gone ahead and done this ribbing type technique, I'm going to take my slip knot off of the central knob, which I placed on originally, and just kind of let that out. This is going to loosen up the project, and you can also see the length better. Now I'm just going to go ahead and e-wrap and then knit around the entire row. And I'm going to do about 7 more rows of knitting, and I'll check in with you when I'm done with that. Alright, so this is what it looks like now, and I'm going to go ahead and move on to making the heel. So this is the numbering system that I'm going to use. The little arrows where the central knob will be, it just works like a clock. So I'm going to go ahead and e-wrap the first 5 pegs only, so it's like I'm doing a partial row. And I'm just taking my hook and I'm just knitting off those first 5 only. Then what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to take my working yarn and I'm going to loop it around peg 6, and then I'm going to go ahead and e-wrap back around peg 5, then peg 4, then peg 3, then peg 2, and then finally peg 1. Then I'm going to go ahead and once again, I'm just going to knit off pegs 1 through 5. And make sure you don't knit off peg 6. You'll be really tempted to just keep on knitting off, but make sure you don't knit off that last peg. I'm just pulling those loops down to the bottom of the loom, and I'm going to go ahead and loop around peg 12 as shown here, and then I'm going to go ahead and e-wrap pegs 1 through 5 again. By knitting the same pegs over and over and over again, it's going to create that heel look. Then I'm just knitting off pegs 5 through 1 once again. Alright, so I'm moving those loops down to the bottom of the loom. And I'm going to go ahead, and you can see I already have 2 loops created here on pegs 12 and peg 6. And I'm going to add another loop on peg 5, and then e-wrap pegs 4 through 1, and then I'm going to knit these off. So if you can kind of see the pattern, we're adding a loop each time, and then lessening the amount of pegs that we're e-wrapping. That's kind of the technique to create the round shape of the heel. Alright, so finally I'm going to loop peg 1 and then e-wrap pegs 2 through 4. This is going to be the last one of these. And then I'm only going to knit off pegs 2 and 3. Alright, so that's kind of the whole process of building the heel. And so now I'm just going to e-wrap pegs 3 through 1. Ugh, can't even talk. And pull those down to the bottom, and I'm going to e-wrap and knit off then pegs 1 through 4. So now I'm doing basically the same opposite. I'm increasing in the ones that I'm e-wrapping, and as you can see here, on some of these, I'm going to be knitting off a total of 2 loops over 1 loop, if that makes sense. Like there'll be a total of 3 loops on the loom, which is fine. Then I'm e-wrapping and knitting off pegs 4 all the way to peg 12, and you can see there peg 12 had the 3 loops on it. It's just going to be a little bit harder to knit off, but that's totally fine. Alright, so I'm pushing those down to the bottom of the loom, and I'm going to e-wrap and knit off then pegs 12 all the way through 5. So once again, 5 will have the 3 loops on it. I'm just going to pull the 2 loops over the 1 and then knit the rest off normally. Hopefully this made sense for you. I encourage you to watch the segment over again because it can be a little confusing to understand at first, but hopefully I explained it clear enough. Then for that last loop peg 6, I'm just going ahead and e-wrapping and knitting off the rest of the row. You know, it doesn't make sense to give it its own half row if that makes, I don't even know what I'm talking about. I sound like I'm a crazy person, and that's what it looks like. Now I'm going to go ahead and make the toe after knitting another 5 additional rows of just knitting. So I'm doing the exact same thing that I did for making the heel, but instead of making it on the right half of the loom, you can see I'm doing it on the left half of the loom. So this is going to curve the toe the other direction than the heel. I feel like I'm talking like an alien, but I hope it makes sense to you all. It's pretty self-explanatory, but maybe understanding it might be a little more complicated. When you see the final product, it'll make sense. So now, after I've done that completely, I'm just going to cut my yarn, and I'm going to go ahead and do the drawstring bind-off method like you would do when removing a hat. You could use a plastic needle for this to make things easier. I just chose to use my plastic hook because it's just the easiest way for me to do it. Alright, so I'm just cinching that, and I'm going to tie a little knot on that, and that's kind of the shape of the booty. I've gone ahead and pulled over the cuff, and you can see how the left one has a shorter cuff than the right one. You could change up the pattern to make it how you want. I kind of prefer, actually, the shorter cuff, and I did that by only doing the rib pattern for 6 rows instead of 8. I also chose a thicker yarn for this left one, as you can see here, versus the one on the right, which has used a thinner yarn. It's up to you how stretchy you want the actual sock to be, if you want it to last longer or whatever. Here's the long loom variation. You can see the one on the left is huge compared to the one on the right. To make the bigger size, you need a 10-inch nifty knitter long loom and also a loom clip. You can clip it off from anywhere from 12 looms to 16 pegs. To make the 12 loom peg one, you can make the smaller version, or in this one I used a 16 peg version. It's the same exact pattern, it's just at a bigger scale, so it's for a bigger